The sad news was almost a third of them really didn't feel like they knew enough to do anything. And in fact, if you're really talking about climate change, they weren't doing anything at least within the next 10 years. A quick, easy way to read this is if you look below green, nothing is happening that's good. The brown is saying, oh, yes, we are doing things to upgrade our berths, our quays, the terminals, to adjust to the 100-year flood event. The 100-year flood event is not a rational way to make decisions. It is something that was pulled out because we all have 10 fingers, we like round numbers, and 10 would be too short and 100 seemed about right. It isn't based on a benefit cost analysis. It isn't looking at what type of investment should we make in mitigation, what would we potentially save based on the probability of an event. It is almost always too little. So if you look at the green, those are people who are trying to do something that goes beyond the 100-year flood event, but not necessarily for flooding. Is that 2, 5? Oh, I thought that was a timer. If you looked at their planning process, only 4% actually had a plan to deal with adaptation. So one way to look at it is 90% of the stuff I consume, probably only 4% of the people out there getting it to me are thinking about it. 8% had some things in their budgets, 12% were addressing it in their strategic plan. Increasingly, insurance is becoming popular. I mentioned the other day that insurance companies are at the forefront of thinking about this, and you can't do business without insurance. So definitely there's a great deal of vulnerability when it comes to ports and climate change in that part of the blue economy. Not nearly enough is being done. I'm going to quickly shift over to wind energy, maybe not as quickly as I thought. There is just an incredible amount of potential for wind energy out there. I'm going to briefly mention the Northeast and then talk a bit about a Rhode Island project that was already mentioned. It's a test project, really. And then I'm going to also talk about the vulnerability to the turbines, the onshore infrastructure, and then also, quite importantly, again, getting back to ports, the ports that are going to service those wind farms when they get built. Thank you. In 2014, the International Energy Agency estimated that we had around 9 gigawatts of offshore wind in the world, and that's overwhelmingly in Europe. The United States, by 2020, has a goal of, the Energy Lab in the United States estimated that by the end of this particular decade, that's going to jump up to almost 50 gigawatts. That's just incredible growth. And as a nation, just the United States alone, by the middle of this century, we expect to have almost 90 gigawatts. You know, essentially 10 times what's produced globally right now. We're not alone. Taiwan's doing this, Hong Kong's doing this, Indonesia's doing this. The world is going in this direction. And for many reasons, like acidification, this is a good thing. Now, in the Northeast where I am, we're a leader in the United States for a number of reasons. One is we have a lot of cities that are pretty densely populated, and we have strong electrical demand, which means we have high power prices. We also have a lot of opposition to pretty much any type of onshore electrical facility, power plant, coal, natural gas, and in fact, in a lot of communities, even land-based wind power. We have some of the most consistent, stiffest ocean breezes in the world, and we have a very wide and shallow continental shelf, which means we can both get out to where the wind's very good, but the belief is we can avoid political opposition by getting out there beyond where people can see it. We have also had strong political support by the governors in the Northeast. The 3 governors of Rhode Island have worked hard to make the project happen. The governor of New York, Governor Cuomo, has made the very aggressive policy of 50% of the state's power by renewable sources by 2030 and looking heavily at wind power for that. The governor of Massachusetts has actually said that the state needs to buy 1.5 gigawatts of energy from offshore wind farms, even though there's none for sale at this point in time. So in a lot of ways, it could be a good market, and hence it's not surprising that if you look at where wind power is starting to be built or proposed in the United States, it is clustering heavily in the northeastern part of the United States. Now, one of the potential issues with that, however, is that's also this part of the United States. So that's the paths of hurricanes, and through Sandy in there as well. And you can see that while we have that consistent wind that's very good for power, we also have extreme events. Now, most of the experience is with European wind turbines, and in the North Sea, where you do not have as extreme events, although you can have very extreme events, but not as extreme, they've experienced monopile failures, they've experienced failures of the foundations, the turbines themselves have failed at times, sometimes spectacularly, and underwater cables have failed. I want to make it clear, all of these were designed not to fail, and yet they failed under circumstances they were designed to be able to withstand. So we have much stronger storms than they do. So with that in mind, I'm going to shift to Block Island. This is a test facility of 6 turbines. They just finished putting on the blades last month. It's supposed to come online after testing probably around the beginning of October. It is in anticipation of building another wind farm between Massachusetts and Rhode Island, although really in federal waters, which would have 300 to 400 turbines. And there you can see it from offshore. You can see Rhode Island and where the cable needs to go. The design of this is that the foundations are built for the 1,000-year flood event. So that's showing a willingness to over-engineer the foundations. However, the turbines themselves are only designed for a Category 3 hurricane, almost 200 kilometers per hour. So there is no design excess if they fail to meet that standard or if the actual winds are higher. We really have no actual real-life experience with the hurricanes, and that's why it's a good thing to have a test facility. But once again, these are very rare events, so it's unlikely we're even going to be able to get any real winds like that before we launch the larger facility. Well, one of the things that the proponents are saying is, well, the turbines are easy to repair. So it really isn't a problem if we lose some turbines because it's a quick fix. But that completely overlooks the issue of whether after a major hurricane you will have the capacity to repair them. You need specialized port facilities and you need specialized boats to work on these, which you tend to keep in the same area that would get hit by the hurricane. So if you lose those, it isn't like when we lose power on land and we can easily bring in the same type of equipment from all over the country. We are going to be in a very serious situation unless we invest in excess capacity. The cable, the plans now are to have a single cable come ashore because that's cheaper rather than having any type of redundancy. The cable did not actually reach its design depths because we have a lot of surface geology in Rhode Island and right offshore, and it was too expensive to drill into the granite at that point. The onshore infrastructure is all going to be in the way of a hurricane. So if we get 50% of our power from this type of wind farm in Rhode Island, we might have 50% of our power down for an extended period of time. And I think overall, we have not spent enough time really studying the potential vulnerabilities of increased dependency. It's not wrong to be increasingly dependent on renewable energy. Of course it isn't. But it's reckless not to really consider the vulnerabilities and how we can mitigate those. So some of my concluding thoughts here are, we need ports. There's no doubt about it. And we need renewable energy. But we have to think more about how our interconnectedness can both bring us together and create joint vulnerability, and how we can plan about that. The United Nations is really starting to look into the port vulnerability, and I think that's a very, very good thing. We need renewable energy. So I think what we also need is we need humility and caution. We need, when we are dealing with as much force as the Earth can throw at us, we need to think about what happens when we're wrong, and then think about whether we really need to, and think about the complexity of the system instead of just each particular location. And then we need to be willing to invest more than we're investing. So for example, when we're dealing with the turbines, spend more money on ones that are harder to break than ones that are easier to fix. If we're dealing with ports, and particularly ones that are servicing our wind farms, spend the extra money to get them up to the storm that we think can't happen. This willingness to invest in redundancy, even though it increased cost. In engineering, historically, we've often invested in redundancy, and really, that's something we lost in the 20th century in most cases, in many cases. And particularly when we're dealing with wind development, at least in the United States, these are private companies that are investing, and they're in a market. So they have an incentive to try to reduce their operation costs. So it's understandable that they don't want things like redundancy. However, this is a regulated market. And hence, the state governments can allow pricing in a way that makes it affordable. You know, it's another externality, and this has been a problem with pricing of energy, and I would argue that once again, this is a problem with the pricing of energy that we're not taking into consideration. So with that, I would like to say thank you very much. Oops, went too far. And next time I come back, I'll learn to operate this properly. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Robert, for your wonderful presentation. And there's 2 points. One about the port, the other about the renewable energies. 我想 Robert 这边提到2个，一个是关于港口的部分。其实像刚他提到，我觉得因为台湾可能经验比较多，所以我想这个部分其实台湾做的应该还蛮有信心、蛮有把握的。那但是第2个部分提到离岸风力发电，我想台湾也在一个开始的阶段。其实像刚提到，现在公司是民间的，但是后面的 support 是政府部门的。但是还是有很多其他的民间部门有很多 concern， 所以我想这个部分，看起来他们已经有个成功的第1个案例。那欧洲可能更多，但是我想这有很多值得我们学习的地方。So, is there any question or comment for Robert's presentation?
You assemble the Subaru in USA, but you import the parts from all over the world. This is good, maybe good for the blue economics, but maybe bad for the ecology. So is that a good solution to save the Earth?
So the correct statement was, is that better? The absolutely correct statement was that the turbines that were installed in the United States were produced in Europe. Europe already has the facilities. It's a bidding process. They were able to do it more cheaply than American companies, even after shipping it across the United States. And then the question was, does that make sense for the environment? The answer is no. I would say it doesn't. And everybody recognizes that if the United States is going to scale up, that it needs to develop the infrastructure and the expertise to do this. This is why it's absolutely the right time, as we develop our facilities, to think about the vulnerability of those facilities. They will be brand new facilities. So, for example, and hopefully this will not get back to the governor of my state, if I were to develop the facilities in New England, I would actually do them in New Bedford, Massachusetts, because it already has a pre-existing hurricane barrier that could be cheaply elevated. And all of those facilities that I think are so important to protect could be protected behind the hurricane barrier, or at least they have a much better chance. And also, you have the double redundancy that you could move some of the equipment through the Cape Cod Canal to the other side of Cape Cod, where you would get the natural defenses of the Cape Cod. Well, it's a glacial moraine that sits out there of the ocean. So one of the problems in the United States is Rhode Island wants the economic development. They want the taxes. If you think about things like the environment and vulnerability, it would actually make more sense for it to go to Massachusetts. So often that's a reason why the federal government should step in and be heavily involved in the development of wind power on a regional level. And we already have the Northeast Regional Ocean Planning Board. So we do things like that in New England. It would be a great place to try to get together and agree on how we will develop the necessary infrastructure to create our own industry.
Okay, Robert, thank you for your answer. And I forgot to mention that Robert has lawyer backgrounds. So I think everything he said will be very based on legal. 另外一件事情补充一下，就是目前罗德岛大学其实跟印尼政府有合作，所以他们有在印尼开班，帮他们的海洋渔业部针对他们高级官员授课，告诉他们一些海洋事务的管理的部分。那我这边特别提呢，是想到刚提到说，我们有一些官员曾经到罗德岛去受训过。那我想在座有一些重要的海洋部门，如果你们有兴趣的话，其实也碰巧他们教授这一年刚好是休假，所以各位可以有机会邀请他到台湾来开班授课。我想他应该会很乐意为了台湾的食物回来的。Okay, the next one speaker will be from Dr. Xun from Korea, and